Hello everyone, thanks for reviewing our chapter presentation. We will be covering Chapter 21, Legal and Ethical Issues in Editing. Your presenters are Amy Limpert, Paige Wagner, and Stephen Saxton. Obviously, this is Stephen. We're not going to recite everything from the chapter. We assume you have read or will read the chapter. However, we will be presenting some highlights. In our time together, we will be discussing the editor's responsibility for protecting intellectual property, the editor's responsibility for product safety and liability, the editor's responsibility for ethical choices. In addition, we will take a more in-depth view at copyrights, trademarks, and adherence to style guides as both legal and ethical matters. Many countries, including the U.S., recognize intellectual property as an owned asset. Intellectual property includes original writings, artwork, photographs, recordings, computer programs, or any expression that will live in a fixed form, printed, recorded, or posted on the internet. Reproducing copyrighted work other than your own violates copyright laws. In 1976, the United States passed the Copyright Act. The Copyright Act gives the owner of a copyright the right to reproduce and distribute the work and to prepare derivative works based on the copyrighted work. Copyrights belong to the author, unless the author wrote the piece under the terms of employment. Many technical writers and editors work for hire, and the materials they write become the property of the employer. Works constructed by several authors are usually protected by a single copyright, but sections may be copyrighted separately. For maximum legal protection, a published work should include a notice of copyright. Copyright laws and use of original works vary by country. Permission must be obtained from the copyright holder to reproduce any part of an author's work. Writers generally request permission. However, as an editor, you ensure permission has been obtained and documented prior to material being released.
Fair use allows some free copying for educational or non-commercial purposes. In educational settings, a student can photocopy academic journals to aid in studying. Always be cautious about copying in a work setting, especially if the material will be widely distributed or the organization can profit from the work. Unless an organization has purchased a site license, software cannot be duplicated for multiple users. Web materials and email messages are protected by the same copyright laws as printed material. Since the web allows information to be shared without purchase, using it for personal use does not deprive the author of any monetary reimbursement. However, if you use the content from the web to make a profit, you will be violating the copyright law.
Trademarks are brand names, phrases, graphics, or logos that brand and identify products. If trademarks are registered with the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, no one else can use those marks with their own product. Trademarks are capitalized, in print, and can be found in the dictionary. A company's brand is its identity and what sets it apart from the competition. Editors have to ensure brand integrity is maintained throughout the writing and the design of materials. Trademark symbols are generally only used on the first occurrence in a work or listed in a publication front matter. Editors look to style guides as a key to high quality and efficient editing. A style guide aligns the creative and production teams with the writers, editors, and proofreaders. They showcase the preferred spelling, punctuation, capitalization, abbreviations, and more for specific brands. Coca-Cola has spent billions of dollars ensuring their brand is represented across all fronts. Here is an example of the appropriate font choices to use. Editors must be careful to ensure that trademarks are referred to correctly in all text, illustrations, materials, and on the web. Here are specific Coca-Cola trademark examples that showcase proper grammar, capitalization, and abbreviations. Editors have to ensure that brand integrity is maintained throughout the writing and design of all materials for all their customers. Editors must be aware that patents protect inventions like copyright laws protect writing.
Product safety and liability is a very big topic of interest for companies and individuals in the United States because they must assume responsibility for the safety of their products as they are used or even misused by consumers. So products must be designed to be as safe as possible, and design cannot ensure safety. So instructions for use and warnings must be complete and clear. So this is kind of where you have a cup of coffee, for example, and it's written all over the coffee cup and lid, cautions for contents are hot, or sometimes they even have it in different languages. So that way they can kind of safeguard themselves for misuse or user error kind of deals, so they can protect themselves, because even though a lid is made to securely fit on the cup, if someone spills it, they could be liable. And there was actually a case a few years back where McDonald's was sued for hot coffee being spilled on a consumer. Libel, fraud, and misrepresentation are very important for writers and editors to be aware of as well, because this is where a lot of companies may get into trouble and may get into lawsuits over these things. So libel is a defamatory statement without evidence that shames or lowers the public reputation of an identifiable person. Individuals who can prove libel may win damages from a publisher. Fiction editors and periodical editors are more concerned with this than technical editors, just based on the content of what they're writing about, but it's important that all editors should be aware of the repercussions. Fraud and misrepresentation deceive the public, and misrepresentation may occur in labeling products or making claims about products, credentials, or data. And just a recent example of this, in the past year, there was a federal class action lawsuit brought against Subway after a Chicago man took a picture of a Subway $5 footlong, and it was shorter than 12 inches. So it was a picture of the sub, ruler right next to it.
So far, we have spent some time discussing the editor's responsibility for protecting intellectual property and the editor's responsibility for product safety and liability. Thus far, the conversation has centered on legal issues that leave very little room for discussion. The last part of our conversation has to do with the editor's responsibility for ethical choices. It is necessary for professionals in any field to make ethical choices. Technical editors are no exception. Ethical choices become more difficult when the interest of one stakeholder is in conflict with another. The stakeholders included in technical communication are users, clients, the employer, the profession itself, and the environment. At times, the interest of these stakeholders will be in conflict. For example, the end user of a product wants clear, spelled out instructions with many full-color illustrations. The end user is not concerned about the cost of producing such a document. Your client, for whom you are editing, wants the document as streamlined as possible in order to reduce costs so that their company can stay in business for the long term. As a technical editor, you will be required to balance those types of stakeholder goals with ethical decisions and recommendations. Technical editors have a responsibility to look closely and critically for unintentional misrepresentations as well as accidental omissions in the information. If a heavy equipment operator is depending on a manual's instructions to operate the machinery safely, but the manual is lacking steps of operation, the operator will become frustrated and possibly even injure himself or others. It does not matter if the omission was unintentional. It can still be a costly error. A reader reads technical communication with a different disposition than they do advertising writing. They expect advertisement to be lacking pertinent details. However, a reader expects that technical data will include all necessary information. Technical communicators have an ethical obligation to ensure that information is accurate, correct, and complete. The text says this well. Editors have an ethical responsibility to understand the structure and style of visuals as well as words so that they can correct unintentional misrepresentation. This may seem extreme, but it is the ethical responsibility of the technical editor. Technical communicators consider themselves professionals rather than staff or laborers. This classification demands technical editors make ethical decisions to protect the reputation of the profession. All professions have some type of code of ethics that practitioners agree to. This code of conduct helps the technical communicator make the right decision when the law does not speak to the issue specifically. This is the value of a code of ethics. In no way does a code remove all ambiguity, but it does help. Organizations like the Society for Technical Communication and the American Society of Business Press Editors provide ethical guidelines for their members. The textbook on page 326 provides a copy of ethical guidelines approved by the Society for Technical Communication. Making ethical choices in the technical communication field is more than just about being honest and doing quality work. It also means the technical communicator must take their expertise seriously. Technical communicators are communication experts who assist trained professionals in other fields. Those experts in astronomy, software development, or whatever field usually are not also experts in communication. They need you. They need a technical communicator to help them to know the best way to communicate information. The technical editor is the reader's advocate and the expert on how things should be communicated. If the client is making a poor choice on the medium of communication or the presentation of data, it is the responsibility of the technical communicator to inform the client and make suggestions. Technical communicators have an ethical obligation to suggest the best means of communication. The textbook on page 327 speaks to this well. Ethics in technical communication involves more than passively telling the truth. It also requires a proactive position in offering information and helping to guide the decisions of people who lack the specialized knowledge of the communicator and therefore do not see all the consequences of choice. The technical communicator has an ethical responsibility to not just make sure facts are presented, but to make sure they are presented in clear, understandable ways. There are many things ethical decisions can be based on, such as principles, law, and professional standards. If you notice that last line of the quote we read from page 327, and therefore do not see all the consequences of choice. It is the technical editor's responsibility to think through the consequences of choices different players are making in the production of the document. Often ethical choices are based on consequences. Questions like, how will this choice affect the reader? How will this communication choice affect the client? How will this medium choice affect the environment? The technical editor is aware of the consequences of their choices on the reader, both for his or her understanding of the material and for the environment in which the reader lives.
So how can an organization establish policies for legal and ethical conduct? So an organization should have policies defining what constitute ethical communication. They should also include procedures to include training of staff in ethical issues and document review for compliance in order to increase the chances that their employees will maintain high legal and ethical standards.